Hello and welcome back to the Keep Right On podcast. I'm Alex Dicken and today I'm not joined by my usual co-host Brian Dick. Instead, Ben Hawker from Blues Breakdown and Blues fan Alex Byers are joining me to discuss the run-up to Christmas and everything Birmingham City related. Guys, how are you both doing? And thanks for coming back on. It feels like it's been a while.
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. All good. I mean, Blues have won 6 in a row. Christmas next week, and I think Alex Dicken's got to drive to Crawley on Monday night, so it's all good at the moment.
Ben, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you, mate. Yeah, been a while, but nice to be back on. Yeah, it's just very busy with work and life, and the same as everybody else. But good time to be a Blues fan, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels like an absolute age since that Shrewsbury meltdown where Blues lost and with their worst performance of the season. Since then, it's been 6 straight wins. Everything's rosy, isn't it? It feels like Chris Davies has found the right formula, doesn't it, Ben?
Yeah, it does a little bit, and I think we've seen somewhat of a tactical. I'm not going to say tactical evolution, but kind of a bit of a tactical switch and things. So if you kind of take the first sort of 15-ish games of the season, and that was probably Chris Davies ball version 1.1, and with a lot of the attacks being focused down the right-hand side of the pitch, and the right back, whoever that was, being afforded a bit more license to get forward. And I think what we've seen more in more recent games is maybe version 1.2, where we use the left-hand side a little bit more, and obviously pre-injury Cochrane getting forward a little bit more. So it feels like a tweak rather than a massive evolution, but it's certainly paying off. And I think we probably said during the summer, during things, and most Blue fans would have realised, but it takes time to implement a new system, and for the players to gel together. And I think we're starting to see all of that come together, on a more consistent basis now, rather than seeing, sort of 40, 50, 60 minutes of it. We're starting to see, large chunks of it during games. So, good to see.
It felt a little bit like version 1.3. Against Bristol Rovers, because Lee Buchanan came back in and wasn't quite as high on the left-hand side as Cochrane has been, and also didn't invert in the way that he did against Exeter in midweek last week. So it felt a little bit more like a flat back four, where both full-backs were playing slightly further forward than the centre-backs, but not necessarily bombing on down the wings. On Buchanan, Alex Byers, he was excellent, wasn't he? And that does create quite the battle at left-back now.
Yeah, he was superb. As you said, he wasn't advanced as Cochrane played it in the recent games before his injury. So he was more of a flat back forward. I didn't think we actually used him all that often in open play. We seemed to there was a few times where we'd look out to him and we'd turn back and go back out on the right hand side. But he was solid. You know what you're going to get with Buchanan. He's very tidy on the ball. He's very disciplined. He competes for every ball. Obviously took his goal really well. Yeah, it gives us a bit of a headache, but I think we're going to need him anyway. I mean, Cochrane had played virtually every minute of every single match. I think when he had come out, we'd been trying to stick Keller in there, and people it wasn't really working. So we had the two of them for a reason, I think, for these fixtures, and I think we're going to need them both over Christmas. But yeah, it's looking good. Form's very good, as Ben suggested. A few tweaks. I think it's released Anderson, who's doing really well, and it's probably helped Alfie May as well, get into the box a bit more. Stansfield seems to be enjoying it, so I think we're in a really good position.
Who do we think wins the Buchanan-Cochrane battle? Because there's always going to be a first choice. Both of them are going to get plenty of football with the games Blues have got coming up. But who do we think wins that battle?
Well, that's putting us on the spot early doors, isn't it, there, Alex?
We are 4 minutes in.
Look, I don't know. I think Cochrane has been outstanding since he's come in, and as Alex rightly points out, he's played virtually every minute so far, largely down to the fact that he's probably been one of the only recognised fit left back in the squad at this point. But he has been really, really outstanding so far this season. But I think because of how good he's been, people have almost forgotten how good of a left back Lee Buchanan actually is. And I didn't unfortunately didn't see the game on Saturday against Bristol Rovers, but reading about it, and it seems like Buchanan had a really, really good game. So I certainly think we're in a fortunate position whereby we've got two excellent players who can play that role in slightly different ways. Who wins it? I'm not nailing my colours to any mast at this point. Sit firmly on the fence.
I think because go on, Alex. Carry on.
Sorry, yeah, I was going to say, I think if you're looking for someone to play that sort of left-sided centre-half role almost as it was being played at the start of the season, you'd possibly side with Buchanan. And then if you're looking for someone to bomb on and put deliveries in, you may be going with Cochrane. But is there an argument that we might even see both of them at some point? You could play with Cochrane advanced on the left-hand side, and you could play Buchanan as sort of a left-sided centre-back. So I think that's possible. We might even see that at some stage over the season.
Very, very versatile players. It'd be an interesting battle, to be fair. I mean, we forget Buchanan's got 102 championship appearances to his belt at the age of 23. Cochrane's come in and done so well. We haven't missed Buchanan in the opening, 15, 16 league games. So yeah. Busy period coming up. Blues play 5 games in 13 days between Crawley away on the 23rd December and Wigan away on the 4th of January. Obviously, the fixture list has been made a little bit harder and a little bit more tricky for Blues because that game has been moved for Sky coverage, whereas Wycombe, I think, play Friday night in their first game. So, those fixtures, those 5 games are spread out over a little bit of a longer period. Looking at the fixtures of the top 3 currently, so you've got Wycombe in first, Blues second, Wrexham in third. Blues have got a game in hand on Wycombe and will go top if they win it. So Blues, Crawley away, Burton at home, Blackpool at home, Stockport away, Wigan away. Wycombe, Bolton at home, Stevenage away, Charlton away, Exeter at home, Blackpool at home. And Wrexham, Bristol Rovers away, Blackpool at home, Wigan home, Barnsley away and Peterborough at home. Who has the most favourable run of fixtures there?
Have you memorised all of those, Ben?
I heard Peterborough a couple of times, I feel. Go on.
No, I was going to say, I've done crunching the numbers last week. I think it worked out that Blues had, I think they were averaging in those 5 games 15th place. So they've obviously got a couple of teams lower down the table. Wigan as well have been quite poor this season generally, and Blackpool very indifferent. Stockport the only one of those 5 fixtures who are right up and in amongst it.
I feel that the sort of strength of the opposition for Blues is less important than for other teams. I feel like Blues are on it. Generally, if we're on it, I think we're too good for everyone. I think we saw during the 7-game run, which is almost being mirrored now, I think it was probably our most comfortable part of the season. And it was actually the teams down the bottom who didn't want to have the ball that we struggled against. So I'm kind of past looking at Blues' fixtures in terms of difficulty level. I think it's more about how frequent they are. And that's probably going to be the challenge. But yeah, for the other sides, I think Wrexham have shown away from home against anyone moderately competent. They've dropped quite a lot of points. I think they do. They lost at Stevenage. They've drawn a couple. They lost at Stockport. So I think once they start playing some of these away games, I think they might hopefully fall away. Wycombe obviously doing amazing. I still think they'll probably fall away a little bit. I still actually think Huddersfield will be the team that finishes second, but that might be a debate for another day. But yeah, in terms of strength of fixtures and opposition, I think Blues can almost look past that in a sense that I think we just need to concentrate on ourselves.
Huddersfield.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in and say I think there's some interesting fixtures, isn't there, in those 5? You've got Burton with new manager now in charge, right down towards the foot of the table. But we've seen firsthand what new managers can come in and do, and the kind of potential lift that they can give to a club, albeit Shrewsbury's lift just seemed to be only against us and not against anybody else. Blackpool, had that amazing start under Steve Bruce and then really fell away a bit, but I think have won their last 3 games now and on the trot. Stockport away will be, we suspect might be a difficult game on paper, but we kind of said that for the home fixture. Yes, they caused us a few problems in the second half when they went very direct, but first half, we were in complete control in that game. And then Wigan, a game that we largely struggled really in the home fixture, albeit it was towards the start of the season, but they've been indifferent in form over for the rest of the season. So as Alex says, I don't think there's anybody there I don't think there's anybody now that we look at on paper and go, we really fear them at all. It'll be down to, as Alex says, our own performance levels and how much that fixture congestion will affect the players. And it'll be interesting to see what Chris Davies does in terms of selection over that period, because there will have to be some rotation across that period. There's no way that we can line up 5 times the same.
Interesting, Alex, when you mentioned Huddersfield, they have, since that game on October 1st, they have won 7, drawn 3 of 10 league games. And I do think they're probably going to emerge as I say main contender. It's difficult to say main contender to Blues at the moment because they are still second, but I do think they're going to be the challenger over the course of a season. I'm not sure Wycombe are going to have the squad to maintain it, whereas looking at Huddersfield, the players they've got, they kept a good chunk of their players from last season, the Championship. They probably do have the depth and also the manager in Michael Duff to sustain it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, underlying numbers for Huddersfield suggest that they're probably the second best team in the division behind Blues at the moment. Wycombe overperforming, but have been for some time. So at what point do you kind of say, actually, maybe the argument is always that if you're over or underperforming, your underlying numbers for a period of time, that at some point you'll kind of regress to the mean and your performances will tail off. But they've been overperforming now for some time, that you maybe say maybe this is just a bit of a freak and maybe they will just continue at this level. I suspect, as Alex says, that at some point they will drop off. They'll probably remain around in the playoff picture. But I tend to agree that I think Huddersfield will probably come through in the second half of the season and will probably finish in second.
You've also got, I suppose, take into account January, haven't you? Because we go into January from a Birmingham City perspective thinking they're not going to get their best players nicked, are they, this time around? Whereas you look at Wycombe and the striker they've got in Kone, who scored a good number of goals first half of the season, only 21, 22 years old, I think. There probably are going to be clubs higher up that are going to be interested in him, maybe a couple of other their players. So are they going to be able to hang on to them if good bids come in, which again will change the landscape where it's second half of the season if they do lose 1 or 2 players. So yeah.
I'd also throw into that as well, Alex, the manager Matt Bloomfield.
Yeah.
I think we've seen that he's been linked, albeit just in the media and things, to a couple of the jobs up in the Championship and higher up the pyramid. So it'd be you could see that continuing in the second half, and if he were to walk away, that perhaps derails their season somewhat as well. Yeah.
Moving on to Crawley, what a fixture to put on the 23rd of December, 8 p.m. 3 hour trip, 6 hour round trip. It's going to be great. Are you two going? Either of you two venturing to Crawley?
I'll be watching on the TV with my fingers crossed. I'm thinking of you on your drive home.
can't say I blame you. Crawley are an interesting team, 21st in the league. They have picked up a little bit recently, 7 points in the last 4 games, including wins over Rotherham and Charlton. They actually average the second highest possession in the league with 58.6%, obviously after Blues and their 70%. Conceded 32 goals. Only Shrewsbury and Peterborough have conceded more. On paper, Ben, Crawley feel like the sort of opponent that the rare opponent that are going to come out and actually play Blues at their own game. Do you think it will pan out that way?
To an extent, it may well do. I think, again, as I say, I didn't see the game against Bristol Rovers, but I think from what I've heard and the little bits that I've seen, they tried to play a little bit of football, and I think when you've not got the quality to be able to do that, it becomes very difficult. And I think that's probably what we've seen with Crawley. They had Scott Lindsay in charge at the start of the season, who I think, was a particular, he favoured that more possession-based style, and I think their pressing numbers are fairly decent in terms of how intensely they press. I think they're ranking 4th in the league at the moment for PPDA, which is a measure of pressing intensity. But then you kind of look through the rest of the numbers, and they rank very mid-table in terms of XG4 is 16th, open play 11th, open play XG 11th, shots is 13th. So they're struggling to convert that possession into anything particularly meaningful. And then likewise, in terms of defensive numbers, they rank in kind of the bottom third for their defensive numbers. So they're trying to play a style that is probably a little bit beyond them, and it's not being particularly effective. As you say, that if that works in Blues' favour, because I think we've seen sides come out and set their stall that they're just going to sit behind the ball. Then those are the games where we've struggled a little bit more so. So yeah, fingers crossed. Hope that Crawley decide that they are going to try and play us our own game.
Yeah, I get the feeling Chris Davies might be a fan of Crawley, whereas he's not been a fan of many other teams that Blues have faced this season.
I think if you look at some of the other teams, the other teams that are on top of the list for possession, every time they've played against Blues, they've generally just not tried to keep the ball up there. They've just sat in and with a low block. So I know I think they're obviously you mentioned they're second in possession stats. I wouldn't be surprised if they just completely throw that out the window and just sit in against us like Stockport and Bolton did, particularly in the first half. So we'll see. But I do hope they have a go at us, because I think Bristol Rovers did that thing that I think Bolton and Stockport did in the first half, where they pushed their defence up but didn't press the ball, and we just picked them off over and over again, which I think is pretty much the worst thing you can do against Blues. And then they also tried to play out from the back and played straight into our press. So hopefully they'll do a little bit of a similar thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if they just park the bus.
The teams that have caused Blues most issues this season, probably Charlton and Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury is a one-off, a weird kind of new manager atmosphere type thing. But Charlton actually pressed Blues really well with two quite energetic strikers. One of them who was extremely energetic and fast and got in behind, especially down the right-hand side quite a bit. So I suppose there is a blueprint to actually not necessarily get a result, but at least cause Blues issues. And a lot of the teams haven't really been following it, because when teams have generally turned up and played very defensive and sat in and tried to counter-attack, Blues have usually beaten them. So
yeah, I mean, I think it was a while ago, but I think Nathan Jones and Charlton got it very right that day in terms of their midfield completely nullified ours and completely pressed Pakenwater out of the game. And it was a bit of a freak. And actually Charlton since then haven't really pushed on and made anything of that. And I think I tweeted at the time that those are the kind of games that Nathan Jones absolutely lives for. He's still talking about that victory that he achieved over Pep, a couple of years ago, and the victory against Blues he'll be talking about that in a couple of years' time when he's still managing in League One or League Two. So we'll check that off as a win for him on that day. But it's not really amounted to anything else.
Not a Nathan Jones fan, are you, Ben?
How could you tell?
Moving on to questions. Thanks again. We've had loads of questions come in. Really helpful, make up a good chunk of the podcast, and also give us interesting things to talk about that we wouldn't have otherwise thought about ourselves. From Saul Loser FM, do you think the style of play affects the fans and the atmosphere? Other than the keep right on at the beginning, it can be fairly quiet in the ground with the slow build-up to our play. Do you think this is the reason? It's an interesting one, that is. Alex, take it away.
Yeah, I actually spoke about this with a few friends last week. I mean, bit of a sad conversation, isn't it, really? But I think that the Blues atmosphere is at its best when we're an underdog, and two, when we're sort of playing on the break and there's that sort of quick transition from defence to attack, and we're sort of marauding up the pitch and the fans get up for it. And also, crunching tackles and things like that. And the three things that we generally just don't really see, because whenever the underdog, we generally have the ball for almost the entirety of the game. And because the opposition's sat in, there's not that quick transition from defence to attack. So I think it's quite hard to get that sort of volume up in the stadium. I mean, obviously, there's an onus on the fans to do a bit more, but I don't think it's a negative thing for the style of play. I can't say, it's a boring style, or we need to play with more speed. I think the style's effective and we're winning games and we're scoring goals. So I think the players are doing their part, but I do think there's a natural sort of quietening down of the fans just by the very nature of the actual matches, the way they play out.
there's like a natural expectation, isn't there, this season, I suppose, that Blues will beat every team that comes to St Andrews, and so far it has pretty much been like that. So I think it will probably change when Blues do go up and they have, championship teams coming to St Andrews again. It's going to be far more even. Teams that could potentially come and actually beat Blues. So more kind of end-to-end games rather than Blues just being camped inside someone else's half, passing it around and probing and trying to find spaces, which doesn't really lend itself to an atmosphere, as you said. So yeah, I think that's probably something that we're going to have to live with in games this season, where it's going to be a bog standard 2-0 win at St Andrews, and the atmosphere is not going to be electric. But there will be nights like Wrexham where it is. So there'll be a bit of both. Matt Hawkins says, with Wycombe and Wrexham seemingly keeping the pace so far, could it be a total failure if Blues went up second and didn't win the league?
Total failure. No, I think the objective this season is to get out of League One at the first time of asking, right? So I think as long as that objective is achieved, I don't think you could class the season as a total failure. I think the media potentially, if we don't win the league, and social media will probably bill it as a bit of a failure. We spent all this supposed money, and we've had the biggest budget in League One ever. So to finish second, you can just see it now, can't you? The headlines, or Blues are finished behind little old Wycombe or whoever. I think we will win the league. I don't think it'll be something that we have to talk about later on in the season. But I don't think it would be a total failure for the club if we finished in second place and went up automatically.
It'd be slightly underwhelming, wouldn't it? It'd be slightly underwhelming. It wouldn't be a total failure. It wouldn't really be a failure, would it? I mean, if Blues get out of League One, that's kind of what everyone wants.
It's job done. Tick the box, move on. But yeah, it'd be nice to do it. I think we've said all season we've not achieved any success in recent years. So to be able to lift a trophy, even if it is League One, would be nice to see, or at least one.
And the last two teams who went back-to-back promotions from League One to the Premier League both finished second. So there's an omen if not that we want to finish second, but yeah. Anyway, moving on to George Ravel. Do you think the fixture pile-up will work in Blues' favour, having the biggest squad in the league, or do you think our pressing style of play, it will be a period where we start to see a bit of tiredness in the players? Now, that's an interesting one, because I think what we also need to look at that with that question is that Blues do have most of the possession anyway, so a lot of the time it is the opposition that are working harder than Blues. So do we think it's going to have any impact? I don't necessarily think it will. I think the fact Blues are playing their 5 games in this period over 13 days rather than Wycombe, who are playing theirs over 16 days, I think that might have a little bit of an impact, because it's going to be 3-day. League One teams are used to playing every 3 days, so Wycombe have got an extra 3 days rest, which I think will make a big difference. But Blues do have the biggest squad. They can rotate. I think it depends how well Chris Davies rotates over this period. That's going to be the key. I think he started to do it a little bit better over the last 6 games. Granted, a few of those have been in the cups, so he usually has rotated in the cups. But I think he's done it well. And I think the win at Exeter last week, where he made 8 changes and gave a lot of players minutes, would probably have given him more confidence in using those players in a league game, because that was a decent League One side that they beat. So I would expect it to work in Blues' favour, having the games congested.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily helps us, but I think it affects us less than other teams. So I think if you look at Wycombe, they've basically got 13 players that they rotate, whereas we've probably got 18 that we can call upon. So I don't think it helps us, because I think we've seen this season that the 3rd game in a week has been our poorest. But I think it might impact the likes of Wycombe and Wrexham more than it impacts us. And I think I think if he's ever going to use Leonard and that now, he's got to start using Leonard and potentially bringing Dykes back in and Gardner Hitman. You look at I think we've had a 9-day gap to the Crawley game. I think it will probably be full strength again, the same team again. I think you're looking at maybe the Burton one in between is maybe the one at home to Burton, where you can put Leonard in and put Garner Hitman in potentially. Maybe Yokoyama. Maybe just mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, Definitely. From Nath, what's the situation with the injured players? Do you think they'll be back over the Christmas period? So Blues have currently got Cochrane, Wright and Samstead out, haven't they? Samstead, Chris Davis said last week, is closer than Wright. There's a chance he'll be back in training and available over the Christmas games. He was hopeful that Wright will be available some point over the Christmas games, but again, he's been out for 2 months now, hasn't he? So he's got to come back and train for probably a couple of weeks before he's available for selection. So it'll be interesting to see whether he makes any of the Christmas games, and if he does, you'd probably expect it to be the latter ones, the ones in the new year. Who else is there? Cochrane has a cut on his foot, so it's about waiting for that to actually heal before he can start taking part in full training again and start running with his football boots on. But as we saw against Bristol Rovers, Buchanan's not a bad deputy, and Blues have also got Ethan Laird who can switch across and play in that position. Gardner Hickman played it quite well second half against Exeter in the Cup. So I don't think Blues have many issues at left back and can probably cope like they have without Buchanan for the first half of the season. Jack, areas you think we could be looking to improve in the January window? I find this a difficult question because Blues have got such a stacked squad that it's hard to say they should go out and sign someone in January. I think they will. I think there'll probably be a wild card in there as well. But guys, looking at the squad, where do you think Blues could improve?
Do you want to take this one first, Alex?
I think Blues. I think the only thing we're missing is a bit of explosive pace and power. I think we don't tend to, when we do get the rare opportunities, we don't tend to break particularly quickly, and I think that is owed to potentially a little bit of lack of pace. Think about sort of Thor and Anderson. To be fair, has been doing well, but I think Thor, Anderson, Stansfield, May, they're not the quickest in terms of explosive pace. And I think someone at the top end who's lightning quick and electric would be something that we could add. Although I would say I don't think we're going to be adding anyone that we don't see as a potential starter in the Championship at this stage.
Good point.
I would agree, and I think, and I know this is a question or forms part of one of the next questions, but it's seemingly Yokoyama doesn't have the full trust yet of Davis to be starting in games, and I think he could really. I think we've seen in the appearances he has made, he probably does have those attributes, albeit he's still learning the game and learning English football, and I think that will come. Otherwise, we've seen a few links to centre back. Phil Newman from Hanover doesn't seem to be going away. So potentially somebody who could play that kind of tucked in right back or right centre back role potentially. I don't think will be. January is a difficult time to buy anyway. It tends to be. I think you see business from clubs who are struggling in the league more so in January rather than those clubs that are doing well, largely because, if you're doing well, you've probably assembled a fairly decent squad anyway. But yeah, it's not particularly a buyer's market. And as you say, what Blues don't want to do is to fall into a trap of improving in quality for the league, but then being in a situation where they go, actually, we've now got a player who's probably not going to play a huge part in a championship season. Because I think, hopefully next summer when we get back into the championship, I think we'll see the recruitment follow the similar sort of lines as to what we saw this summer in terms of it almost being above the level that we're at, or certainly right at the top end of the level that we're at. So I think any signings that we do make in January will need to be with a view to how will they fit into a championship squad.
I think there's probably going to be room for a centre back if Dion Sanderson is allowed to leave. He's only played 7 games first half of the season, so you would expect him to look for regular football elsewhere, and then it just kind of depends, I think, on who else leaves and how desperate they are to replace them. I don't think they'll come out the window with anything under the number of players they've got now. I think they'll probably want to maintain the strength or improve the strength. I think there's probably room for a wild card sign as well. Blues are normally busy in windows, and it wouldn't surprise them when sign someone probably of the mould that Alex suggested, a more explosive player with a bit of speed, because Blues haven't necessarily got that. Even Keshi Anderson, I wouldn't say that's his main strength. I would say the wide areas are somewhere that I would think could be improved. I think they're going to need to be improved if and when Blues do go up. I don't think they've got a championship stacked wide area. I think they'll probably need one or two wingers. So if they could do something in January there, then that'd probably be a good thing now before those FFP rules tighten a little bit next summer if Blues are back in the championship. Next question from Paul Kelly. Hi guys, a lot of fans seem puzzled with Chris Davis' faith in Luke Harris over Mark Leonard and Yokoyama. What are your thoughts? Personally, I wouldn't be upset if Harris returned to Fulham in January to give our own players more opportunities.
I don't want to be too harsh on the lad. He's a young lad, obviously. I think it's his second season in senior football. I've not been blown away by him so far. I do think he's been quite quiet in the majority of games. Maybe a little bit timid at times. Not involved as you'd like to see someone playing as a number 10 in the team that is dominating the ball and should be winning the league. Davies clearly sees something in him. I think what he has shown is that he can get into good positions in the box. I think he's shown on a couple of occasions that he's quite a calm finisher. But I think he's got to do a lot more in open play. He's got to be a lot more involved and just play with a bit more character. It just seems you want to see a bit more arrogance from him on the ball and a bit more expression. Whether that will come with more game time, he's obviously had quite a bad injury that he's returned from. I don't think we'll be sending him back in January. I think he'll probably see out the season with us, but I think he's going to have to do more if he's going to be extending his stay into next year.
It's an interesting point you make there, Alex, actually about him being needing a little bit more arrogance, because I agree I think we've seen glimpses of his quality, albeit he is very passive in games, and as you said, they just tend to kind of pass him by a little bit. It's easy to say after the fact, but I wonder if Blues was the right club for him to come to on this second loan. There's a lot of big characters in the dressing room. He wasn't going to be kind of the main man in this team at all. And whether or not, I agree. I think he'll probably see out the rest of the season with us. But I think certainly another loan at this level, but in a side where he can be that main man, will probably suit him a little bit better, because I think then you'll see whether or not he sinks or swims. He'll either continue to be passive in given that role, or he'll step up to the plate and grab that opportunity. But yeah, I certainly think he needs to do a little bit more, albeit we have seen kind of glimpses of some quality that he does have.
Yeah, it was a slightly strange low move, wasn't it? I think from a Fulham and Harris perspective, because normally those low moves are designed to pretty much guarantee the player gets minutes. And with the other players that Blues are signed at that particular time, Harris is never going to be guaranteed that. I think even now, if you said, what's Blues' best 11 on paper, Harris wouldn't be in it. And to be honest, given the strength of the squad, he's probably going to be one of those players you're looking at as to be rotated in and out of the squad when everyone's fit. So it's a slightly weird low move from my point of view, but I think he's done okay in spells. He's shown that he's got attributes to score goals at this level. Has a knack of finding his way into the box, and he's a decent finisher when he gets in there. So hopefully we do see an improvement from him over the second half of the season. And like you both said, I don't expect him to go back to Fulham and go elsewhere in January. I think he'll see out the loan. Final question from Dave J. Can I ask, do you think any players who have been out on loan realistically have a future with the club when, he says, we are promoted? What has been the biggest surprise from the season so far, be it Blues related or a new ground visit maybe? So start with the first question there. Loan players, those that are currently out on loan, do we think any of them have futures with Blues? So obviously Ramel Donovan's just come back from Burton. George Hall's out on loan with Walsall and has sadly had another hamstring injury there. And obviously Tyler Roberts is out at Northampton Town in League One as well. Anyone that you think will be knocking on the Blues' door in the coming years, or do we think that those loans are probably designed to put them in the shop window and get permanent moves elsewhere?
I'll answer that one first. No, I struggle to see any of them coming back and playing any significant part in a Birmingham City season going forward, quite frankly. I think, as you say, I think it was designed to put some of these players back in shop windows. We've seen obviously Donovan return early from his spell at Burton for whatever reason. I can't see him coming back in. I think there'll be some fans clamour to see him back, but the reports from Burton were that he was fairly poor. Again, didn't really impact games. Albeit, I think for a period of the season he was playing probably slightly out of position. Was almost playing as a forward, more of a striker than a wide player. But yeah, I've spoken to several Burton fans who were very, very underwhelmed with his performances. George Hall, I think, has been doing well for a Walsall side that are flying. But again, we've seen the reoccurrence of injuries that have hampered him at such a young age already, and it's hard to see that won't continue to hamper him. And I think with Hall, it'd probably be a case of he goes elsewhere, and we probably see him rise back up over the next couple of years. One of those that you kind of go, okay, yeah, nice to see him in doing well, but I can't see him coming back and being a part of a Birmingham City Championship side. Tyler Roberts, no, I think it was a slightly odd signing when we made it anyway last season. Again, obvious quality and previous performances, but I don't think we ever really saw anything consistent and substantial from him that suggested that he would be a big player for us going forward. So, yeah, the short answer is no from me.
We'll always have the Tyler Roberts game against Coventry. Yeah. No, I'm probably of the same opinion there, Ben. Donovan's obviously got a lot of potential, but hasn't quite been unlocked yet, and it'd be interesting to see what they do with him in January. Obviously, he's only been training with the 21 since he's come back to Blues. Second half of that question, I'm going to throw it out to you guys because I'm struggling a little bit myself. What has been the biggest surprise from the season so far, be it Blues related or a new ground visit maybe? Anything about League One or the teams in it or Blues themselves? Anything surprised you?
No major shocks from League One, I don't think. Even though we were promised many. I mean, to be fair, we did lose at Shrewsbury Town in a storm.
That was a shock, yeah, that was a shock.
But we'll forget about that one. No, I think the only one I would say is probably the prominence of Keshi Anderson. Maybe if I'm picking one out. I do like Keshi Anderson, and I did like him last year, but in the summer I was kind of 50-50 on the basis that I thought, yeah, good squad player, but if he's not fit and available very often, what's the point, sort of thing. But I think he looks like a yard quicker. He looks really fit. He looks like he's playing with a lot of aggression and confidence. I'm really surprised how he's taken to the role on the wide right, because I think there was a game last year towards the end, might have been Cardiff and Borough at home, where he come on the right hand side and he looked like he didn't have a clue what to do when he had the ball. He didn't know how to take someone on the outside. He looked lost. So to see him now playing on the right hand side and playing like a traditional winger and going past people and delivering the balls, that's probably one of the biggest surprises for me. But some people won't be surprised, because I know he was largely popular with a lot of fans anyway. That's probably the only one I can think of. Otherwise, I think it's going as we might have expected. 42 points from 18 games, I think, is brilliant at this stage, despite Wickham's run. Maybe Wickham are the surprise. If you'd have said 42 points from 18 games, you'd have said we're certainly going to be top of the league.
I think Cash is a really good one because he has been excellent this season, and probably, if you're looking for the kind of early player of the season contender, Cash is probably right up there, isn't he, in the top 2 or 3? So he has been a pleasant surprise because he's one of the few from last season who is still around. But I think also looking at Keshi last season, he had very little impact in that he wasn't picked by a number of the managers regularly when he actually was regularly in the team at the start of the season, and at the end of the season Blues were actually quite good, so he's almost absolved from much of the blame for that. Keshi's a really good one. Ben?
It's a bit of an archetypal Blues story, Keshi Anderson as well. He came in initially on trial, worked hard, earned himself a contract with us, as you say, was largely okay and fairly decent when he played last season. He comes back, you probably think he's one where he doesn't have much of a role to play with us this season, given the change in style and the kind of caliber of players that we're bringing in. But again, works really hard, fights his way back into the team, and is, as you say, is probably in contention for an early player of the season now. And like I say, it's just a very archetypal kind of Birmingham City type story, that, isn't it? Which is really nice. In terms of surprises, shocks from me, it's difficult to pick out. It was slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I think a lot of fans thought that League One fans of League One sides might be slightly more realistic and a bit more kind of, have a bit more footballing knowledge, but a lot of them seem as salty as Championship fans. And, we've seen the kind of flipping between, you'll find it tough this season, and, you're in for a massive shock to, you've spent loads of money, so you should be beating us type of thing. So I think what I've learned is that fans of opposition sides, regardless of division, are absolutely the same. Otherwise, no huge shocks. I thought Charlton would probably be doing a little bit better this season under Nathan Jones, despite my dislike for the man. I thought, that he would probably have them challenging towards the playoff picture, but they've largely been very poor. As a minor surprise of the season, but no, as Alex said, no huge shocks.
He's taken down Nathan Jones and the fans of every other EFL club. What a way
I won't be
to
coming
end
back on again.
Way to end it.
Going down in a blaze of glory.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll have the next podcast on Christmas Eve, which is actually mine and Brian's review of 2024. We promise not to look back too much on last season and focus a little bit more on this season. So tune into that one and have a wonderful Christmas. Hopefully Blues give us something early to celebrate with a win at Crawley. It's a big keep right on from all three of us. Thank you.